Hello, everyone. Welcome to an episode of Monk Chat with Ayasoma and Bhante Sudaso. So this evening, we will be answering a few questions that are already on the live chat and some more if you'd like to put them in. So we will start with 2 questions max per person, and then if there's more questions and more time, we can proceed with the others. So we will start by chanting the Ratana Sutta, and we will. Is there a link already?
No, there's not a link. I'll put a link in. Though some of you probably already have the link.
And hello, Sally. Happy continuation. Sally turned 1 year younger today and offered the meal to the monastery. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for your kindness. And hello.
1 year younger? How does that work?
Or 1 year closer to enlightenment.
Okay.
And hello, Bradley, Janice, Tesha.
Wow, and Jesus Christ
has just logged in.
Well, welcome. I mean, I thought you were dead, but that didn't seem to stop you a couple thousand years ago. So
yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. Hello, Eric. Ryan, Joe. Oh, wow. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu for being in tune, even though you're in the UK, which is kind of late at night. And hello, Elaine, Gabriella, Gita, Lilia. Good to see you all.
We'll go ahead and start with the chanting. So please, if you would like to chant along. Hello, Bradley. He just screamed, aka laughed very hard. Did we say something funny?
Maybe Jesus.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe some other prophets and religious figures will join in too. We'll see. So we're always open. Maybe Mahabrahma will log in. Who knows?
That would be fun.
Sakka's always welcome. Anyway, so we'll do the chanting. Please chant along if you wish to. And then we'll go through your questions. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vantaleke. Sabeva bhuta sumana bhavantu atopi saka chasunantu vasitam. Tasmahi bhutani sameta sabe metam karota manusiya pajaya. Devacharato chaharanti evalim tasmahi nera kata apamata. Yan kinchivitam idavahuram vasage suvayam ratanam panitam. Nano samangati tathagatena idampi buddhe ratanam panitam. Edena sachena suvati hotu. Kayam viragam amatam panitam yadajaga sakya muni samahito. Natena dhammena samati kinchi idampi dhamme ratanam panitam. Edena sachena suvati hotu. Yam buddha seto parivannai suchim samadhi manandari kanyamahu. Samadhinadena samona vijjati idampi dhamme ratanam panitam Edena sachena suvati hotu Ye bungala tasatang pasata chatari dhani yugani hondi Te dakineya sugata sasavakai te sudinnani mahapalani Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena subhati hotu Yeso payota manasa dalhena dekamino gotamasa sanamhi Te pati padamatam vigaya landamutanim buddhim punjamana Idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sachena suvati hotu Yatinna kilo patavim sito siya chatum vivade biyasampagampiyo Tatu pamang samburisam vadami yo arya satchani aveksha passati Idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sachena suvati hotu Ye arya satchani vibhavayanti gambhira panyena sudesitani Kinchapi te hundi pusapamata na te bhavanga tamanga diyanti Idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sachena suvati hotu Sahava sadasana sampadaya taya sudhamma jahita bhavanti Sakaya ditti vichike chitancha silambatang apiyadati kinchi Chatuhapaye hicha vipamoto chachabhitanani abhambokatum Idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sachena suvati hotu Kinchapi sokamam karoti papakam kayena vacha uracheta sava Abhambo sota sapati chadaya abhambata ditapada samutam Idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sachena suvati hotu Vanapagumbe yatha pusidange gimhanamase patamasmin gimhe Tadupamang dhammavarang adesai nibbanagamim paramang hidayam Idampi buddhe ratanam panitam etena sachena suvati hotu Varo varanyo varado varaharo anutaro dhammavarang adesai Idampi buddhe ratanam panitam etena sachena suvati hotu Kinam puranam navam nati sambhavam virata citta ayatike bhavasmim Te kina bija virulhin chanda nibanti dhiraya tayam paripo Idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sachena suvati hotu Yani dhabhutani samagatani bummani vayani vantaleke Tathagatam deva manusa pujitam buddham namasama suvati hotu Yani dhabhutani samagatani bummani vayani vantaleke Tathagatam deva manusa pujitam dhammam namasama suvati hotu. Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vantareke. Tathagatam deva manusa pujitam sangham namasama suvati hotu. Etena sacha vajjena dukhavupasamentu te. Etena sacha vajjena bhayavupasamentu te. Etena sacha vajjena rogavupasamentu te. All right, wonderful, wonderful. So we'll go ahead and start going through the questions. So Ayasoma wanted to start this evening, and of course we always do what Ayasoma wants.
I wanted to start. I did.
What's that? I know, I just made this up on the spot.
Okay, well, hello, Elaine. So Elaine is asking, do you think it is okay to use music to elevate a chronically depressed mood? I know music is considered to cultivate a restless mind, but in such cases, could it be used therapeutically? Don't we want a calm, peaceful mind at death? And if the long road, that is meditation, isn't really making a dent in persistent low mood, would you think it is okay? Do you want to answer?
No, you go first.
All right. So I would say that, and possibly my answer will not be as orthodox as Bante's. I would say it's circumstantial. So is it you as a practitioner, or is it for someone else? So in order to have a very peaceful mind in any moment, but in particular at death, a very stable mind, it requires practice. It's not something that can be, at least this is my unenlightened opinion, so take it with a pinch of salt, but I think it would be a little bit too much to expect from someone who is dying. So if out of compassion we think that is something that could help them overcome whatever they're going through, then possibly that could be a compassionate way to bring them closer, to accompany them to death. This being said, if we think that it's unnecessary, if we think that they're already like in a sort of peaceful acceptance state, whether or not they are a practitioner, then I would find this to be unnecessary. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't have a clear yes and no answer, because I would make that decision personally based on being in the situation, being with the people involved. It's a circumstantial decision rather than a kind of scriptural decision or a precept decision, or I don't know. I feel like if I would go towards that route, it would be a little bit too dogmatic. And even though I love precepts and I love Buddhism and I love lots of things, I feel like sometimes one needs to be a bit practical. What do you have to say? He's going to say the opposite.
No. So, next question. Is it okay to chew gum in the evening and or take juice with a vegan protein powder in it? Thinking of the rules associated with proper timing of meals. So gum in the evening, yes, totally fine. So gum is just sugar and artificial flavoring on some kind of inedible goo that you chew on. So that's all perfectly fine. I wouldn't recommend swallowing it. Well, for one, that's not recommended anyway, but it also gets into some dodgy vinaya issues if you're swallowing it. But yeah, chewing gum is definitely fine. As for vegan protein powder, probably not. Probably not. That sounds a bit too much like food. I'd have a really hard time fitting that under any of the exceptions that we find. If you want something a bit more substantial, then soy milk is accepted in most Western Theravada forest monasteries. It's not particularly commonly accepted in Asia, but in the West, for some reason, it's quite common. The Buddha specifically allowed bean broth, and that's interpreted to include soy milk. So bean broth is definitely acceptable. But yeah, vegan protein powder, probably not according to my understanding of Vinaya. Okay.
Gabriela is asking, what are the methods a person can use to still anger and contempt? Oh, how apt. So it's quite interesting. So since I'm unenlightened, actually today I got angry after quite some time.
Not at me, for a change. And actually, she'll be giving a whole talk on dealing with anger because she has a lot of experience with this subject.
As does Bante. So perhaps it should be co-led. Anyway, it's interesting. So my mind was afflicted by the defilement of anger today, which was unwholesome. But at the same time, also, if I think back, definitely with a lot less momentum than even like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, even last year, even a few months ago. So it's a practice as usual. And what have found that really helps making these episodes more and more sporadic and more distant and with less and less momentum is by constantly reflecting on the gratification, the danger, and the escape. So the gratification is what the Buddha calls the honey tip of anger. The danger is what the Buddha calls the poison root of anger. And the escape is the Noble Eightfold Path. So practicing the way out of suffering. So really reflecting what is so delicious. So for me, it's delicious, the righteousness in it. When I think I'm right and when I think I'm protecting something that is very valuable. Like, for example, it can be the Dhamma, the Buddhism as a whole, the triple gem, or the donations that come from people, like the spirit through which people support us. So all very noble things. So something that I care very much about, that is the righteousness. And then there's the wrong view that is, well, I should be angry about this. I should really defend it, like I get aggressive with it, which is what poisons the experience, which is fundamentally a big waste of time at best and a very harmful thing at worst. So whenever we're experiencing, for example, righteous indignation, it's very important to understand the mechanisms and start separating the wholesome from the unwholesome. So the things that we're trying to protect or the unskillful behavior that we are seeing, good, that's critical thinking. So we save that part. The anger, the reactivity, the poisonness, that is stuff that we need to toss, that we don't need to keep. And always recollecting that whenever we actually don't act because sometimes we're skillful at it and we don't get angry. Actually act out of compassion, understanding that perhaps the person that we're dealing with, or the situation, or the group of people that we're dealing with, are full of greed, hatred, and delusion, so that they're acting out of delusion. Then we understand that, and we see that we also have greed, hatred, and delusion ourselves. Then we can act out of compassion, because we're all in this together. So we're all trembling together. So that's then we see, how light the mind is, how big the heart is, how much spaciousness there is for cultivating wholesomeness. And that creates, as a consequence, stilling of the mind. And then there is no contempt, because we don't create any sort of idea that we're superior, or that we're inferior, or that we're the same. We just have an understanding that this is the way things are, that this is just the nature of how things are, of samsara.
And Gabriella's second question, she asks, is there any way to dampen the results of karma aside from total liberation? And if there are any, what are they? Well, there are some things that you can do. So the Buddha spoke about the simile of the handful of salt. So he said to the monks, if you take a handful of salt and you put it in a glass of water, does the water taste salty? And the monk said, well, of course, it would be extremely salty. It would be virtually undrinkable, in fact. And the Buddha said, well, what if you took that same handful of salt and you put it in a lake? Would the lake taste salty? And the monk said, no, the salt would be so diluted you would barely taste it. You might not notice it at all. So the Buddha said, in the same way, someone who does some evil deed and who has very little virtue, then that evil karma will vastly overpower the little good karma that they have. So they will get very harmful results. But someone who does some evil deed, but they have a huge amount of virtue, they've done a lot of good deeds, a lot of good karma, then the effect of that evil karma will be so diluted that the effect it has on that person will be quite minimal. It will still have an effect, but that effect will be diluted by all the good karma that they do. So the best thing to do to dampen the effect of bad karma is to do a lot of good karma. Do a lot of good things. Fill your life with wholesomeness, with virtue, with generosity, with kindness, and constantly reflect on your goodness. Form a really sincere vow to not do anything harmful ever again, and to do as much good as you possibly can. So that's also the practice of repentance. So in Buddhism, repentance is to recognize the mistakes we've made, vow not to do them again, and commit ourselves to the path of goodness. And that also includes the element of self-forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, recognizing that out of delusion, we made a bad choice, and that's understandable. And there's no value in holding a grudge against ourselves, because we're not the person who made that bad choice. We're the person who's choosing to be good. So we let go of that past bad choice and we focus on our present commitment to goodness. These are all things which dilute the effects of our past bad karma, so that when we do feel it, which we will, there's no escaping karma. We will experience it. But when we do experience it, it will be diluted by all of our goodness. So it won't hurt very much. Okay?
And maybe I'll take Eric's, and then you can take Ryan's, since it's for you.
Okay.
So Eric is asking, what does the Buddha say about gardening? I love spending time in the garden, cultivating plants. Is this just a diversion? Isn't there a tradition of gardening and horticulture within Buddhism? Well, actually, the Buddha used a lot of, metaphors, right? In the suttas that actually are related either to agriculture or like the natural world. And that's for several different reasons. One, obviously, because back in the day, there were less office jobs than these days. So pretty much everybody was kind of familiar with that sort of wording. But also, in my opinion, actually, because it's very apt. Whenever we are immersed in the natural world, we start understanding better a lot of mechanisms of the Dharma. So we happen to have a garden at the Rockaway Summer House, the previous monastery and retreat center. And I was, for a period of time, actually also like the garden manager amongst the many million other things that I that I was doing for Buddhist Insights. And actually, it was remarkable. I had never done such a thing. And because I had a Dharma practice, that would influence the way that I would relate to plants. And watching plants growing, watching the mechanisms of nature, it gave me so much more understanding of the Dharma. So it was very much interconnected. And I understood why in the Mahayana Zen tradition, who, for different historical reasons, started the monastics when they went to China. The Buddhist monastics in that tradition started growing their own food. So they were very much immersed in, there's a big part, it's a big salient piece of, in the Zen tradition, how interconnected and how beneficial that was, and that still is for Dharma practice. So yeah, I think it's very pertinent, and I very much encourage you to do that. It's quite the opposite of a waste of time, and especially these days when the way that the majority of the world is getting fed is extremely unsustainable and creating the causes for climate change. It's also incredibly, beneficial for your own livelihood and the livelihood of others. So it's the most revolutionary thing that you can do, actually, is to grow your own food and share them with your neighbors.
And Ryan asks, a few nights ago, Bhante Sudaso suggested to me my dream of being a monastic might not be inhibited by being bipolar. I am having a depression episode now, and I'm curious what happens with monks who have episodes. In lay life, I can simply take time and reduce the number of obligations I have and take it easy and recover until it passes, and it always passes. Well, it's actually similar in monastic life. So one of the monasteries I lived in, there was a monk who had depressive episodes. And so most of the time he was quite functional, but every once in a while he would get these episodes where basically he would just have to go and lie down in a dark room until it started to lift. And so the community was quite supportive of him. When he was having his episodes, then the community gave him the space to recover. And then when he was recovered, then he would rejoin the community activities. So it does happen. Again, it's not terribly common for various reasons. People with strong issues of that sort don't usually enter monastic life. But when they do, there's usually ways that it can be accommodated. So these are things where whenever you're interested in joining a monastery, you want to be very upfront right from the start about what your condition is and how you work with it. And many monasteries will tell you not here, but some places will say that, yeah, they'll be willing to accommodate your needs. And many monasteries also, the nature of the schedule already gives you enough space for yourself that you might find it's not as big an issue as it is in lay life anyway. So yeah, don't give up on it. It might be a little harder for you to find a monastery to get started at, but you can find ones. Okay.
And Jesus Christ is asking, how would Buddhism explain the Simpsons predicting the future?
Your
is
turn.
it a joke?
I don't know. Anyway, it's your turn. Your question.
Well, I don't watch The Simpsons, so there's that. And so I don't know how the Simpsons predict the future.
Neither do I. I haven't watched The Simpsons since I was a teenager.
And I can get also the second question. Is this Theravada?
No, my turn. It's my turn.
Okay, you can pick the next two. I like, is this Theravada? It might be, or it might not be.
It depends on what you mean by Theravada.
It was my answer.
Hey, that doesn't mean I can't make comments. So then James says in Anguttara Nikaya 5.26, we hear that sutta recitation is an opportunity for awakening. Indeed. Any tips for that practice in suttas you suggest reciting? Yeah, well, first off, learn Pali and then recite suttas that inspire you, suttas that have deep meaning for you. And as you chant them, reflect on the meaning, let the meaning sink deeply into your mind. As you go throughout your day, keep reciting the sutta in your mind, keep reflecting on it as you go throughout your day, so that eventually you get to the point where your mind is just always filled with the suttas. That's one of the great values of reciting a lot of suttas. And you can do it in your own language if you like. You don't have to learn Pali, though you should, but you don't have to. You can recite them in English if you like, but Pali is, of course, better. But yeah, eventually you can get to a point where your mind is just filled with suttas all the time. Rather than being filled with the latest gossip about Kim Kardashian or whatever it is, or who's that person you mentioned, Jimmy Hairstyle or something? Yeah, like whoever it is that people are gossiping about these days, like you just won't be thinking about that because you'll just be thinking about the suttas. So yeah, definitely recite suttas. I recommend reciting ones that you like and maybe memorize some of your favorite suttas. I memorized dozens of suttas as a monk. I used to be able to recite by memory about a third of the Majjhima Nikaya. I haven't kept it up, so I've forgotten much of it. But yeah, I used to be able to recite dozens of suttas from the Majjhima Nikaya. And it's really lovely what that does to your mind. Whenever you're walking around or going anywhere, it's kind of like instead of having songs stuck in your head, you've got suttas stuck in your head. How cool is that? You're just going on and it's like, Evang me sutang ekang samayang bhagava. And you're like, oh, delicious. Rock on. Yep. Okay, your turn.
What are your suggestions for practical observation of the sense fields as not self? Once again, looking at your experience. So I find very useful also seeing how impermanent. Actually, Bante the other day said that he's starting to need. He has a problem with his eyes, so he needs like the book closer.
No, I can't. Away. It has to be farther away. If it's too close, I can't read it.
Yeah, so he was like, "Oh wow, like my mom, used to do when when I was young," and I was like, "Oh, that's so bizarre that she can't like see anymore." But since his eye faculty is subject to impermanence and decrepitude, it is changing. So his experience of sight is changing. As Bante shared the other evening, when I was a child, actually, I used to love chocolate, which is why I had the good idea of like eating the entire cabinet of chocolate and then getting an allergic reaction. And then since that day, I've hated chocolate.
Oh, that's the story. Oh, I'd never heard the story before. I always just thought she was some weirdo who doesn't like chocolate.
Wow. Well, it was a really bad reaction. And I was about 4 or 5. So it's kind of like confused and bodily. But I do vaguely remember there was a time and place where I had the experience of liking chocolate, which is very foreign to me. But also if I think of pretty much, my relationship with taste has radically changed even with my Buddhist practice. So everything is constantly changing. We think of them as reliable, we think of them as who we are. But if we start thinking about them, actually, they are constantly changing. They're impermanent. We have no control over them. We could become blind in this moment and still have a sense of self. We could stop hearing sounds and have a sense of self. We could stop smelling and still have a sense of self. Taste, still sense of self. Mind, would we still have a sense of self? Well, that's your contemplation and meditation.
Great. So let's see, next question. Sally asks, this self-improving question is from yesterday morning, Majjhima Nikaya 15, Anumana Sutta. Maybe someone who is self-centered even can improve oneself and be successful, but it might be off the track of awakening path. Yeah, well, it depends what you mean by self-improvement. So the term self-improvement is used to mean all kinds of things, like improving yourself at what? So an assassin who's practicing self-improvement might mean something very different than a doctor who's practicing self-improvement, which might still be quite different from what a monk means by practicing self-improvement. So self-improvement doesn't really mean anything unless we clarify what it is you're trying to improve about yourself. And as for being successful, again, successful at what? A businessman will think successful means one thing, and a priest will think it means something else, and an actor will think it means something else, and once again, a monk will think it means something quite different from all of those. So self-improvement and successful by themselves don't really mean much of anything. So in Buddhism, we want to improve our spiritual qualities that lead towards awakening, and we want to be successful at the path of awakening. That's what we want. That's what we're aiming at. Okay? Your turn.
Hello, Andre. Good to see you. And James says, if anyone loves these talks, please consider donating to BI at the link near the top of the chat. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu for the impromptu. Oh, there's not a link.
We didn't put the link in.
So it's BuddhistInsights.com/donate. And then we have
here we go. This one, Bradley.
I think that's a good question for you because you like the translations. So how about I go to Mark first, and then Bante goes answers Bradley's because he loves answering translation questions. So Mark says, in many Buddhist groups I've been in, I noticed many people struggling with mental illness, and the teaching's not really helping much. Is this why you said Buddhism begins where psychology ends? Meaning they should get regular therapy first to then support their practice? I would say that one does not need to get therapy first necessarily and then start with the teachings. It can actually happen simultaneously. Or it can, there are some people, there's not a straight cut sort of answer to this. But I will say that it is my experience personally that I did a lot of work on myself before encountering the teachings. Not true. Before starting to practice the teachings, that created the conditions for me to understand what I needed to work on. And that was the biggest benefit of having a sort of psychological approach first and understanding, okay, what is the trauma that I've experienced in this life? What are the, what is the kind of suffering that I'm experiencing? What are the sort of constant patterns repeating patterns that I have? What are the neuroses that I'm experiencing? And then with the Buddhist teachings, then we can keep working with a psychologist who can kind of get us to a sort of place where we are somewhat capable of functioning and then applying the Buddhist teachings. Or we can, if we're already there, we can just start practicing. So it can happen simultaneously. The ideal thing, I would say, is to find a psychologist who really understands Buddhist practice, who actually is Buddhist. Because sometimes what can happen, unfortunately, is for Western psychology to give advice and suggestions that might work for several different people, but are not in accordance with Dhamma. And so especially if we have a lot of faith in the Buddhist teachings, then we will have perhaps some recommendations that go rightly against what we're trying to do. So there can be conflict. So I highly recommend someone who is at least familiar, but in the ideal situation, actually a Buddhist practitioner. And yeah, that's the problem. Struggling with mental illness. So the Buddhist perspective is that, by the way, we're all crazy. We all have a mental illness of one shape or form. There is no one who is sane except for enlightened beings. So really coming very humbly, in a humble way to the path, and understanding that we're really not that special, that everybody's struggling one way or the other. Everybody has some trauma that perhaps they can recollect from this current life, but there's also a lot of crap that we're carrying from previous lives. So there's a whole bundle of mess that we need to work on with our practice. The more help we can have, the better. But if we get to practice with the arrogance of thinking, of using these teachings as a utilitarian tool, not listening to teachers, not practicing the way that it's presented to us, and not looking at our suffering, not doing the work, whether alone or with a therapist, then yes, of course, there's no progress to be made. So those are my thoughts on that. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I just thought of a simile. Is that it's a bit like somebody who wants to train to run the marathon, but they have a debilitating kidney infection. And it's like, well, maybe you should go to the doctor and get your kidney infection treated. And once that's taken care of, then you'll actually be in a condition where you can start training to run the marathon. But if you try to do that while you're suffering from this debilitating infection, then it's not going to be very successful. And in fact, you might wind up harming your health even further. So Buddhist practice for the most part is pretty safe. But yeah, if somebody has, one of the issues of Buddhist practice though is that so much of it is self-directed. So much of it is within our own mind. So someone whose mind is really twisted into knots, sometimes it's really helpful to have the voice of another person to help untangle that a little bit before we can start really working on our own mind. So that can be done through Buddhist practice, but it's harder to find the sort of person who can help you in that way. So there are a handful of Buddhist teachers who have that particular skill set, but they're not common. If you have serious psychological issues, it's better to, have both a therapist and a Buddhist teacher. And of course, my inclination is to say you should always place the Buddhist teacher above the therapist whenever there's any conflict. But that's my own prejudice, perhaps. Anyway, so Bradley's question was, he says, I was reading Majjhima Nikaya 109 today, and I noticed different translators render sankhara as formations, fabrications, choices, thoughts, etc. What's a useful way to understand sankhara? Great question. So the word sankhara, first off, it's used in several different ways in the suttas. So one of the ways it's used is in a very broad general sense to mean any conditional phenomenon, which basically means absolutely anything other than nibbana, anything other than emptiness, anything other than the asankata dhatu, the element of that which is not conditional. So basically everything is a sankhara. So that's sankhara in its broadest sense. Sankhara is also sometimes used to mean mental phenomena, mental objects, mental activities, mental patterns, mental behaviors. And those are the two main usages of the word. There's some less common ones, but those are the two most common usages that you'll see in the suttas. And even just with those two usages, there's quite a number of ways to translate the word. So personally, the way I translate it can vary depending on the context. In some contexts, I'll translate sankhara as phenomena. In others, I'll translate it as activity. In others, I might translate it as thought or mental object. In some places, I might just translate it as thing. So it's not a construct is another one that I commonly like. Construct is a translation of sankhara. Formation is okay. I'm not a huge fan of it because I find it a little bit bland, but it's okay. It's good enough. But actually, often I think it's best. This is one of those technical terms which often I think it's best to leave untranslated. Sankhara just means sankhara, and it's important to know. So even if someone has no interest in learning Pali, if they want to understand the Pali suttas, it's useful to have a good understanding of a few dozen technical terms. And one of those terms is sankhara. Like nibbana. Nibbana doesn't translate well into anything. So you kind of need to just know what the word nibbana means. And you can leave it untranslated. Same with sankhara. You just need to know what it means and you can leave it untranslated. Okay? Your turn.
Well, this is directed to you. Trisha says, Bante, you mentioned that substance abuse, alcoholism isn't uncommon in Buddhist community. Made me think of Chogyam Trungpa. Why would an advanced practitioner turn to substances or leave life as a monk nun?
Well, because most of us are not enlightened, which means we still make mistakes. Okay, your turn.
Yeah, breaking news. Even though we got robes on, we're still not enlightened.
Yeah, so Chogyam Trungpa was definitely not enlightened. He was an interesting character in that in some ways his wisdom faculty was quite well developed, but basically everything else was not. And that made for a really conflicted presentation. And that again, you read some of his books. I never met him in person. He died a long time ago, before I was born, I think. You read some of his books, though, and some of what he had to say was just mind-blowing. But then you read about what he actually did with his life, and you're just like, wow, that's hideously disgusting. So, yeah,
part of his life.
Well,
he also taught a lot of people.
Yeah, he actually, well, this is part of what was confusing, is that he did a lot of good things, but also he did a lot of bad things. But that's because he was not enlightened. He was a Buddhist practitioner who understood the Dhamma well enough to do some good things, but was still defiled enough to do some bad things. Yeah, that's it, really.
And Maya is asking, I'm having trouble contemplating, thinking deeper, and focusing on things that I need to do. Do you have any advice to improve this skill? Yes. Samadhi practice. So you have to learn how to be not busy and how to still the mind with meditation. So we practice stilling the mind. It's always the practice, practicing. And the mind starts settling more and more and more. And then even when it's restless, we don't create more restlessness. We are capable of seeing it as a restless mind. We're capable of seeing the defilements, looking at the defilements and learning from the defilements. So there's obviously like how do you say, results from previous actions that we've done in the past that will appear in the mind. So even if you've been cultivating a peaceful mind for a period of time, not necessarily you will always have a peaceful mind, and there will be a lot of different things that are appearing in the past and will create some sort of noise, mental noise. But the more you practice, the more you will become less less like weirded out by it, which then creates more. The more you become restless about your restlessness, the more restlessness it produces. But if you meet restlessness or fogginess of mind with just acceptance and curiosity and willingness to learn, then you start understanding your experience. And these effects will start not becoming a problem anymore. I hope that answered your question. Okay, we have quite a lot of questions.
Yes, wow, we do. Maybe we should go through this a bit quicker.
Okay.
Well, we'll see. So, Jesus Christ was saying that there's an account of a drunken master becoming enlightened. Not in the suttas, definitely not in the suttas. Enlightenment of immoral people and the Manual of Insight explains it better. The Manual of Insight also is not from the suttas. That was something that was written a few decades ago by a contemporary teacher, and there's a lot of things in the Manual of Insight which don't line up with what's in the suttas, and that's probably one of them. So as much as I respect Jesus Christ, I might have to disagree with him on these particular points. Iceland asks, is it possible for a layperson to reach the Arhat stage of enlightenment? Theoretically possible, but practically it almost never happens. Yeah, for a wide variety of reasons. One of the main reasons why is because the essence of Buddhist practice is renunciation. So naturally, as one gets more advanced along one's Buddhist path, then one naturally becomes more and more inclined towards monastic life, because monastic life is all about renunciation. And also, if one is sincerely committed to the Buddhist path, then one practices renunciation more and more, which means monastic life starts to get more and more appealing. And also, one sees the value of monastic life in supporting one's practice. So it's natural that the vast majority of enlightened beings are monastics. And it's also natural that the vast majority of people who are trying to become arhats in this life choose to become monastics. So for those reasons, although it's technically possible for a layperson to attain arhat, realistically it almost never happens. The person usually winds up as a monastic before they get to that point.
And Marielle is saying, perhaps a writer for The Simpsons has precognition abilities which the Buddha said some people have. Doesn't mean they're enlightened or anything. I have no idea what you guys are talking about. I just don't watch TV, so I don't know. Our pop culture expert in the room is coming to advise. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, me neither.
Never mind.
The pop expert culture also did not.
So advance warning, if your questions involve some knowledge of modern pop culture, we probably will not understand. I haven't had any exposure to pop culture since I was a teenager, which was a long time ago. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and
not sorry.
Even when I was a layperson not practicing Buddhism, I was on a somewhat version of the 8 precepts, apparently. So, so I too was not really very much informed with pop culture. So we don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, Jen says, all day stuck in my head was Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Great. Yes, excellent. So then James says he's currently memorizing Majjhima Nikaya 148. Good for you. Keep it up. Let's see. Where are we next? Mark is asking if there's anything the monastery needs. You're welcome. First off, that's very kind of you to offer. So it's always much appreciated. You can look at our Amazon wish list, or you can send us an email and we'll let you know what we currently most need. So that's very kind of you to offer. Thank you. Trisha says her therapist was the one that recommended meditating years ago. Great, you got a good therapist then. Whose turn is it?
I don't know, you hijacked it, but it's good.
Oh, well, then by all means, take over.
No, I love it.
So Jen is asking.
He's fast. He's like very pragmatic.
Jen is asking, I'm listening to an audiobook called Why Buddhism is True by Robert Wright. I'm about halfway done. Are either of you familiar with this? If so, thoughts?
Okay, I'll answer. Neither of us has read it. Next question. That was safe.
That was a safe answer. That's true. I skimmed it once, but I didn't read it thoroughly.
Oh, and Elaine is a registered psychologist. There you go. We have your first reference. If you're in Ontario, which is pronounced Ontario, Canada.
Yeah,
which
here
is
in
pronounced
Merca.
Canada.
Yeah, in Canada, in Ontario.
I went to Ontario, Canada when I was 15, hence that's why I pronounced it that way.
So, Ontario,
Canada. Toronto. Niagara Falls.
Whoa, that's an interesting one. We call it Niagara.
I know, but back then, it sounds like that.
I have to say, these names sound a lot better in Italian.
So great. I'm happy it's approved by Elaine, the answer. And Jen says, Buddhist practices was able to get me off years of taking anxiety medicine and got me through many hard times. I'm very much looking forward to Aya's talk on traumatic experiences.
Great.
We haven't put it on the schedule yet, but we will put it in the next couple of days. Possibly tomorrow we'll add it. And Jesus is asking, the 5 hindrances don't include morality for entering the first 2 stages of enlightenment, I thought. You
thought wrong. So if you read the Buddha's descriptions of a stream enterer, he's extremely clear that a stream enterer has near perfect morality. Refer to, for example, Majjhima Nikaya 48, I believe, the Kosambhya Sutta, where the Buddha talks about the 7 qualities of a stream enterer. He very clearly states that a stream enterer has perfect morality. Also, countless other places in the suttas, he's very clear on this point. Which perhaps is why, for the past 2,500 years in Buddhist countries, there's always been a huge emphasis on cultivating sila. Yeah. You ain't getting nowhere without sila. Yeah, morality is the foundation of the path. If you want samadhi and you want panya, y'all better build up that sila. And Bradley is asking a very apt question. Is bartending considered wrong livelihood? Correct. Wrong livelihood. Not to be done. Does not conduce towards stream entry. Mark asks, does attaining stream entry mean one is an arhat? No, but it means that you are on the path to becoming an arhat. If you attain stream entry, then you will definitely attain enlightenment. This is the meaning of the word stream enterer or stream entry is that you've entered the stream which flows inevitably towards nibbana, so that you will inevitably attain awakening. And it's said in the suttas that a stream enterer will attain awakening within a maximum of 7 lives as a deva or as a human. Okay.
And Jesus is asking if you reach the first stage. Oh no, he's saying if you reach the first stage, you'll eventually reach Arhat in this life or in future lives. Yeah. All you need to do, just focus on stream entry, which, by the way, it's a lot more accessible than, you're like the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion. Wow, it's like a lot of work ain't happening anytime soon. But then you like, stream entry, that's feasible. Okay. So all I need to become a good person. Okay, I can work on that. Difficult, but not, impossible.
And so you could start, for example, by giving up alcohol. That'd be a great start.
And Lilia is asking, how do I find the wish list in Amazon? You can go on buddhistinsights.com/donate, where there are different ways to support the organization. So it's either donate during monetary donation to help pay the mortgage of Empty Cloud Monastery, so that after the pandemic, people will still be able to find a monastery. Then there is ways to contribute to making food offerings so that the monastic Sangha and the lay residents can eat. Or also during retreats, when we'll start having retreats. Then there's the Amazon wish list that not necessarily has to be purchased on Amazon. We are not endorsing Amazon.
Thank you, yes.
But there's a list of things that are currently needed, like lawn mowers and other such things. And what else? There's other ways to contribute that I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, check out the website. It's all there. Well, not all of it. You can also send us an email.
Yeah.
So Elaine says, what? Go ahead.
Maybe we'll type buddhistinsights.com so people know where to go. And
Gabriella asked, Bhante, do you think it is good to practice visualization and symbolism in meditation, like the Anusati practices in the Brahmaviharas? Yeah, if it helps. In the early stages of practice, those can be really helpful. As you get more deep into the meditation, so maybe after the first 5, 10, 20 minutes, then it's usually better to drop the visuals and the symbols and focus on the feeling itself in the case of the Brahmaviharas, or the recollection itself in the case of the Anusati practices, depending on which practice you're doing. So you're looking for the more subtle feeling, which is underneath the visuals and the images and the words. You're looking for the essence of the meditation object. Which the visuals are meant to help you point your mind towards the essence, but the visuals themselves are not the essence. Okay?
And I love Gabriella, who's the studious one, hence knows exactly that morality, loved by the noble ones. That's the big one you need for stream entry. Brava, Gabriella. A++. Yeah. And yeah, it's never clear what that morality loved by the noble ones, but I'd say between 5 to 300 some precepts, the 300 something being the Bhikkhuni Patimokkha. I would say aside from the number of precepts is cultivating the qualities of mind, so the attitudes of mind. Oh, and actually, Bradley is quoting it right here. And the noble disciple's ethical conduct is loved by the noble ones, unbroken, impeccable, spotless, and unmarred, liberating, praised by sensible people, not mistaken, and leading to immersion.
So that does mean there probably won't be any drunken orgies involved. So once again, Chogyam Trungpa falls off the list.
Right, but you also see how splendid and bright the mind of someone who is entering the stream. What beautiful qualities they are displaying. It's not just like, yeah, he's an average, kind person, or an average, he doesn't steal big things. He only steals a penny here and there, or it's not just really incredible persons, beautiful verses. Thank you for sharing them, Bradley. Delighting the mind.
Okay. And Jesus says, doesn't ill will exist until the third stage? I thought that was morality. So ill will, of course, is something which we're trying to let go of, but I wouldn't equate ill will with morality here. I wouldn't equate overcoming ill will with perfect morality. Because it also says that stream enterers can still occasionally make mistakes. They still commit some minor offenses here and there, but they don't do anything major. And when they do minor things, they immediately recognize their error and repent of it and vow to do better. But there, again, so ill will is that basic tendency towards aversion. It's not necessarily the ill will that leads you to go out on a murder spree, but it's that feeling of like when you see what's being served for lunch and you're kind of like, ugh, that's ill will.
Sorry, that was a funny description.
Okay. And then Elaine says, Bante, I'm in Hamilton, halfway between Toronto and Niagara Falls. I'm trying to pronounce it the Italian way because it sounds nicer. Come visit with Ayasoma when the pandemic is over. My home is open to you both. That's so sweet.
Sad.
We will definitely try to come and visit you. That's very kind of you to offer. And it's your turn, I think.
What is the youngest age to attain enlightenment? I heard it was 7 years old. Actually, I have no idea. I don't know this question. Do you know?
It's never addressed in the suttas. Nowhere in the suttas does it say the youngest age someone can attain enlightenment.
That's why I don't know. Great.
There you go. There's a theory that 7 is the youngest just because that's the youngest person in the suttas. There was a certain person who attained enlightenment at the age of 7 in one sutta. So I think that's the reason why that came to be believed as being the youngest possible age. But realistically, I don't see any rationale whatsoever why someone would need to be 7. Why couldn't a 6-year-old attain enlightenment? Why not? I mean, I was pretty sharp as a 6-year-old. So I don't see why a 6-year-old couldn't attain enlightenment. So I don't think there is such a thing as a minimum age. And if there is, it's not explained anywhere in the suttas.
And Bradley is asking, why is Bante's head more shaved than Aya's? Well, I have more hair.
That's because you don't shave it.
Look, it's like all here.
So long story short, I
Like
shave my head about 3 times a week. She shaves her head about 3 times a year.
No, okay. He shaves every 2 days, 3 days, sometimes every day. I follow the tradition of the Thai forest tradition of shaving every 2 weeks.
So I follow the tradition of the Sri Lankans who keep their heads always shaved to the skin all the time. Yeah.
But Bante always harasses me about this because he would
like seriously, look at this. Look at this. It's ridiculous. So James asks, in Anguttara Nikaya 11:11, it states that each of the 6 recollections, like recollection of the Buddha, ethics, etc., says that one will enter the stream of the teaching. Does this practice lead to stream entry? Well, that's an interesting question. I'd never thought about that. I'll have to look at the sutta and get back to you. Send me an email with that question because I want to look at that sutta.
Let's copy and paste it. This is pretty good question.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to give an immediate answer until I have a look at the sutta that you've referenced. Yeah, so we'll come back to that another time.
Bonus points for finding a question that Bante cannot answer. Well, immediately.
And Marielle's inviting us to the Dominican Republic. Yes, we will come and visit you as well.
We'll be very busy after the pandemic.
Yeah, we have lots of places to go.
Sadhu, thank you. You're all very kind. Be careful what you wish for, then you'll get us. How do you say it? Like bantering, bickering. I don't know. Doesn't matter. And
is this one?
See, Bradley approves of my look. It looks good. Very forced monk. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Edward says, do you think the Buddha would approve of the POC and LGBTQ sanghas? Sure, why not? People who are practicing, of course. Why would he see anything wrong with that? I'm pretty sure that the Buddha would approve of anyone who's honest, genuine practitioner who's on the path towards liberation.
Yeah. Then Victor asks, Bhante, have you read all the sutras? I know that's a book to read. I've read all of the Pali sutras. Reading the Mahayana sutras, that would take a while. I know of people who've read all the Mahayana sutras, and it took many years. So that's not an aspiration of mine, but I would be open to it if the conditions were right. Yeah, I've read some of the Mahayana sutras and appreciated aspects of them. So if I had a time where I had huge amounts of free time, like if I wasn't running a fledgling Buddhist organization and a monastery, for example, if I had huge amounts of free time, then yeah, I'd be quite happy to read through the Mahayana sutras. Yeah.
And by the way, I just wanted to add, Edward, about the POC Sangha, that actually the Buddha started the first POC Sangha. POC, for those who don't know, it means people of color. So actually, the only one he did not start is the people of whiteness Sangha. So
the POW?
Yeah, POW. So
that's actually a really good point. Yeah, I mean, the POC Sangha is the OG.
Yeah,
they
trademarked TM.
Yeah.
Buddhism TM. Thanks to the POC Sangha, today also non-POC people can practice. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu for all our brothers and sisters in Asia for the past 2,500 years who have preserved the teachings and brought them to us. Oh, and we have other invitations in Peru from Lilia and in Tallahassee, Florida, from James. And don't forget, we have to go to Indonesia and India. Sadhu. So basically, we're after Empty Cloud Monastery, and it will be like totally empty because we're like, bye. We're out of here.
Well, apparently we have some traveling coming up, in theory.
And Bradley, I guess, is telling to all of you to come to New Jersey because the two of us are already here. So
that would actually be a little bit easier, to be honest.
Yeah.
Though, I mean, I really like this thing of like going everywhere and meeting all you guys, but it might be a little more convenient for all of you to come here. Anyway, Gita's recommending the Lotus Sutra. Yes, I've read the Lotus Sutra. I've read the Diamond Sutra. I've read much of the Avatamsaka Sutra, but not all of it because it's really long. Fair amount of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, some of the Amitabha Sutras. And I've read quite a bit of the Mahayana Sutras, the more well-known ones, but I haven't really devoted myself to studying them the way that I have to the Pali Suttas. Okay. Then another question from Jesus Christ for you.
Isn't hell said to be a giant oven? Would that be the cremation of care? What does the cremation of care mean?
I have no idea.
Jesus, I'm ESL. So also, actually, you're not. So also Bhante's having problems.
I still don't know what that means.
So we just, Jesus, we don't speak your language. Must be because we're Buddhists. I don't know. Sally says, when can we visit Buddhist Insights? You can visit as soon as the pandemic is over.
Yeah.
You're all welcome to come.
Yes. Maybe we could have like the YouTube group.
The post-pandemic retreat.
Yeah. That would be so much fun. And yes, James, that's the right email.
The Love Stream Retreat. Is it too cheesy? Bante is not smiling, so he probably doesn't appreciate it.
So Gabriella says, a better question, what is hell supposed to be like? And what are the Anantarika hells supposed to be like?
That's a question for him.
Well, there's actually a handful of suttas where the Buddha describes what the hell realms are like. One of the more useful ones is he simply says it's the worst pain you can imagine. There's one sutta where the Buddha, he actually directly says, like, it's really hard to explain how awful the hell realms are. It's the worst possible suffering and torment you can imagine. But then there's also a sutta where the Buddha goes into great graphic detail about what some of the hell realms are like. I don't remember off the top of my head the numbers, somewhere in the middle of the Majjhima Nikaya, but I don't remember off the top of my head, nor do I remember the names off the top of my head. But yeah, like there's one where he talks about all the usual scenes that you'll commonly see in Buddhist artwork of the hell realms, the sword trees, the torturer demons, and all those sorts of things. The boiling pot, like all the horrific descriptions of various kinds of tortures that people go through. And I think to some extent you can take it literally, and that there really are some realms of existence like that. But also to some extent you can see that the Buddha is just trying to communicate the message that the hell realms are absolutely awful. They're unbelievably, horrifically painful and miserable. That's the point he's trying to make. So I wouldn't get too caught up on the specific details, like how tall are the sword trees doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that the hell realms are incredibly painful and miserable places to be. So we want to try to cultivate good karma, to not cultivate bad karma, and to progress swiftly towards awakening so that we are no longer subject to the hell realms.
Okay. Thank you. Can you get out of the hell realms? Yes, of course. We've all been in the hell realms, so we're out of the hell realms here.
Yeah, and Jen asks, is hell the hungry ghost realm? No, the hungry ghost realm is a different realm. Hungry ghost is one step below animal, and the hell realms are below the hungry ghost realm. So hungry ghost is less miserable than the hells, but not as nice as being an animal. And being an animal is actually not particularly nice, by the way, unless you're a domestic house cat. And even then, it's still not that great.
Being a chicken is terrible. Everybody wants to eat you.
Yeah. I mean, the Buddha says the animal realm is characterized by fear and mutual devouring. So not exactly a pleasant state. Again, unless you're a house cat, then it's okay.
Yeah, actually, one of the chickens a few weeks ago was attacked by a hawk, and luckily, the neighbor managed to stop the hawk, so she was alive and well. But I googled how the hawks kill the chickens because I couldn't understand, because there were all the feathers scattered. So what the hawk does, it mobilizes the chicken, comes from above, stops the chicken, and starts tearing up all the feathers, and then when it gets to the skins, starts eating the chicken alive, chunk by chunk by chunk of pieces. This gives you an idea of how horrible the animal realm is, and what those poor chickens now, like that. There are so many predators here, foxes that want to do the same thing, raccoons. In Rockaway there was only the raccoon, and now here they have multiplied. There are all these like different predators.
It's dangerous being an animal.
Yeah.
Okay, and your turn. You want to take the next question?
Does the Buddha ever talk about the female experience? I don't see why he would do that, but I'm curious. Well, we're going to do a special thing dedicated to that, because I'm actually informing myself on not only just the Pali canon and on this subject, but also in other traditions, and it's actually quite interesting. But it depends on why you talk to give an answer to Marielle. What do you mean exactly by the female experience? So what the Buddha talks about is generally the human experience. So that's the core of his teachings. So the core of all the Buddhist teachings are genderless. Then he definitely addresses the female experience. He's very much adamant about saying how there is no difference in terms of the ability of attaining awakening in terms of gender or race or any kind of, or class or social status or whatever it is. So there's lots of information on that. There's also the direct chronicles. Actually, Buddhism is one of the few religions, if not the only one, in which there are still texts that are preserved that chronicle the experience of the bhikkhuni arahats, so the disciples of the Buddha who attained the supreme awakening. So it's incredible, actually, really progressive and inspiring. So there's lots of material.
Okay, and Einstein asks, is there a relationship between human beings and devas? Yeah, so at some point in the past, we've all been devas, and we might be devas again in the future, depending on what karma we've created in the past and what karma we create now. And some humans are able to see devas and communicate with devas. Most can't, but some humans can. It's also an ability that you can develop if you want to. Some people have it naturally, some people develop it intentionally. And for some people, the ability arises naturally as a consequence of their Buddhist practice or other spiritual practices that they do. So yeah, and but there's not really any point in developing that ability. It doesn't necessarily help you on the path to awakening.
And then we have Bradley saying, I've heard some Buddhist teachers say that the hell realms can be experienced on this plane, comparing, say, prison or war to the hell realms. Is that just for comparison? Oh, absolutely. I'm pretty sure that, there's both an actual like plane of existence that is the hell realm, and also we can experience hell realms here. We are currently experiencing one. Like, it's atrocious. Like the coronavirus globally. What kind of like weird karmic conditions do we all have to actually be experiencing this sort of apocalypse happening?
So, yeah, as if the climate catastrophe wasn't enough. So it's like we already had a global cataclysm starting. Like, did we really need another cataclysm at the same time? Like, what kind of twisted sense of humor is this? But it's just our own karma. So what are you going to do? You can't really blame anyone for it. Let's see. So, there's still lots more. Wow, I don't know if we're going to get through all of this tonight. Jesus Christos says, I thought it goes lowest hell, animal, hungry ghost, asura. No, you've got that a little bit out of order. But that's beside the point. Also, asuras in the suttas are usually categorized as devas. There's only one exception I know of, which is in the Digha Nikaya in one place where asuras are classified as lower than humans. Normally, asuras are classified as devas, which would still make them as a higher rebirth than a human rebirth. But it's kind of beside the point because we're trying to get free of rebirth anyway.
Okay, so then we get into the gender question of the Buddha required to be male.
This one.
Oh, Avalokiteshvara. Sorry, Victor is asking. Avalokiteshvara is male or female? I get confused sometimes. It's female, sometimes male statue. Well, how about you reply on this? Because you're a fan of Avalokiteshvara.
So Avalokiteshvara is neither male nor female.
Transgender.
Actually, yeah. So Avalokiteshvara manifests as whatever gender is most useful for helping people. Because bodhisattvas can manifest as either gender, or as no gender, or as multi-gender. Bodhisattvas manifest in whatever way they can be of help. So sometimes Avalokiteshvara takes a female body because sometimes that's what's most helpful. And sometimes Avalokiteshvara takes a male body because sometimes that's what's helpful. Actually, the whole bodhisattva thing really points directly at the emptiness of gender. And Avalokiteshvara is a great example of that.
And Gabriella, of course, has lots of...
You skipped something. So Jesus Christos says, isn't to be a Buddha required to be male? And James says, that sutta is missing the male-only requirement in the Chinese equivalent discourse. So thank you, James. So this is actually a long-standing debate in Buddhism. Can there be a female Samma Sambuddha? It's actually not clear because, as James points out, there are a couple places in the Pali Suttas where it says a Samma Sambuddha is male, but the other preserved scriptural traditions do not say that. And there's no basis in the Dhamma for such a statement. So it's quite suspect.
But also I love Gabriella's point. I love it also because it's what I say all the time too. So this is... I loved it, of course. Gabriella says, only a Samma Sambuddha, but arguably it's the same for 99.99999999999% of men. There's no man who can be a Samma Sambuddha because our Eon already has a Samma Sambuddha. So we're talking about nothing. Marianne says, does Buddhism believe some humans to have a guardian angel deva, or perhaps can some devas take pity on us and decide to protect us a little bit? Oh, cute.
Oh, am I supposed to answer that one?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, guardian devas for the win. Yep. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Also, Gabriella, she has a lot of good study. There's also other traditions outside of Theravada Buddhism which have Samma Sambuddhas for women. So, yeah, great. All right, I think that's all for tonight. So thank you for also sharing your wisdom, Gabriella, Sadhu, and for all of us to come and share your questions and participate in monk chat and for really being such good, genuine practitioners interested in the Dhamma, supporting the Dhamma, practicing with us morning and evening. It's really delightful. Bhante and I are very grateful for you all and for having the opportunity to be practicing together. So we will be meeting again at 8:30. Actually, not with us. Tomorrow, special guest star at 8 a.m. We'll have Venerable Akaliko from Australia. And soon we'll also have Bhante Sujato will be announced soon, who has also agreed to share the Dharma here. So lots of good stuff coming up. And then in the evening, we will be meeting again at 7:30 p.m. And this weekend we'll have two special day longs that together with the next next weekend we'll have two other day longs on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So 1 foundation for mindfulness every day. And Gabriella Sadhu is very excited about Venerable Sujato. And yes, the 4 Satipatthana retreats are happening this Saturday, this Sunday, next Saturday, and next Sunday. Oh, so cute. And James says, wow, Sujato, what a legendary rock star of the suttas. Yeah, we only get the great. And yeah, so Bante will be leading the day longs, and we will have 3 meetings each day. So an extra meeting at 2:30 p.m. So lots of great stuff. Will be really good times.
Great. All right. Well, see you next time. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.